It was a quiet night in the countryside, and the darkness seemed to swallow everything around me, creating a shroud of mystery and unease. I had gone to spend a weekend at my grandmother's house, an old wooden structure that creaked with every movement, as if the house had a life of its own. Although it always had a heavy atmosphere, I loved her company, and our moments together were special. However, that night something felt different. While my grandmother was watching television in the living room, engrossed in her shows, I went to my room and shut the door behind me, craving a bit of privacy. As soon as I lay down, a strange sensation began to fill the air, and then I heard a faint whisper coming from the hallway. It was as if someone was calling my name, but the voice was so low and distant that I could barely make out the words. A chill ran down my spine, making me hesitate, but curiosity pushed me out of bed, drawing me toward the unknown. Cautiously, I got up and walked to the door, opening it slowly to avoid making noise. The hallway was cloaked in darkness, silent except for the sound of the television coming from the living room, where my grandmother was still absorbed in her program. But the voice whispered again, more insistently, and I followed the sound, each step feeling like a challenge to overcome. As I walked, I noticed the walls were covered with old photographs, some of family members I barely knew. The gaze of each portrait seemed to follow me, intensifying the feeling of unease. The atmosphere pressed down on me, and a shiver ran through my body as I felt the presence of those figures from the past. The voice, which had been a distant echo, now sounded as if it were right beside me, calling to me almost seductively. But when I quickly turned, there was no one there. Fear began to consume me, a mix of apprehension and confusion, yet curiosity still pulled me forward, challenging my instinct to retreat to the safety of my room. With my heart racing, I moved down the hallway, each step becoming an internal battle between fear and the desire to uncover the source of that mysterious whisper. The house, with its dancing shadows and subtle creaks, seemed to want to share a long-kept secret, and the feeling that something was about to happen enveloped me. The light from the living room grew weaker, as if the darkness itself was intensifying around me. Curiosity drove me forward, even as my instincts screamed for me to turn back. Then, as I approached the living room, the voice whispered again, more clearly this time, "Come play with me." At that moment, a deep chill ran down my spine, for the essence of the night seemed alive, and I knew that whatever mystery was about to be revealed, nothing would be as I expected. I went down the stairs with my heart racing and found the back door slightly ajar, a crack that invited both curiosity and fear. A cold wind blew in from outside, carrying the damp scent of earth and vegetation, while the darkness in the backyard seemed to deepen, like a bottomless abyss. The voice, which had once been a distant whisper, now seemed to float in the air, coming from somewhere within the shadows. I knew I couldn't ignore it, even as a chill down my spine warned me of danger. I hesitated for a moment, but the need to uncover what was happening was stronger than any instinct for self-preservation. As soon as I stepped onto the backyard's threshold, a sharp crack sounded behind me, and the door slammed shut with force. The noise echoed through the silent night, and when I tried to open the door again, I realized it was locked, cutting off any possibility of escape. My heart pounded, and the voice, now louder and more insistent, called to me as if luring me into the unknown. Then something moved out of the corner of my eye, catching my attention. A silhouette, just a shadow, seemed to be watching me from the large tree at the back of the yard. Fear gripped me, a cold chill running down my spine, but once again I couldn't resist the mysterious force calling me. I approached the tree, and as I did, the voice grew more intense, as if whispering secrets I wasn't meant to hear. An invitation to enter a world hidden in the darkness. With every step I took, it felt as though I was crossing a barrier, venturing into something that should have remained untouched. The sense that what lay ahead would change everything left me on high alert. When I finally got closer to the tree, an intense cold enveloped me. There, under the faint light of the moon, I managed to make out a pale figure with dark, empty eyes staring directly at me. Terror overtook my entire being, and instinctively I wanted to run. But my legs were frozen in place, as if the tree itself was holding me captive. The figure, with a face that was a blend of sadness and despair, slowly raised a hand and pointed toward something on the ground. A gesture that made me feel like I was on the verge of uncovering a dark secret. My heart raced uncontrollably, and the voice now echoed in my mind, becoming a hypnotic mantra. What could that object hidden in the darkness be? Doubt and fear intertwined, and I knew that whatever I found, there would be no turning back. Then, in a sudden flash, I noticed something moving out of the corner of my eye. A silhouette, just a shadow, seemed to be watching me from the large tree at the back of the yard. Fear gripped me, a chilling wave of terror, yet I couldn't resist the curiosity surging within me. With hesitant steps, I approached the tree, and as I did, the voice grew louder, sounding like an entrancing whisper, murmuring secrets I wasn't meant to hear, secrets that felt like cries from a forgotten past. The air around me seemed to pulse with an unfamiliar energy, as if nature itself was aware of what was about to unfold. When I finally got closer, the pale figure standing out in the darkness had dark, hollow eyes that locked onto mine, holding my attention in a hypnotic grip. I wanted to run, adrenaline rushing through my veins, but my legs were frozen by fear, as though the ground itself was anchoring me in place. The figure slowly raised its hand and pointed toward something on the ground, a gesture heavy with meaning. Looking down, I saw a small box partially buried in the earth, covered with dry leaves and dirt. My hands trembled uncontrollably as I dug it out, each movement a blend of dread and anticipation. When I finally opened the lid, a strong, musty smell wafted up, overwhelming my senses, and a wave of strange memories and emotions flooded my mind, as if I had broken a spell. Inside were objects that seemed to belong to people who had once lived in the house, including a photograph of my grandmother as a young woman, standing alongside a group of friends. They wore smiles, but their eyes carried a quiet sadness, a hidden pain. The atmosphere grew oppressive, and the voice now surrounded me, murmuring warnings in an increasingly desperate tone, as though I had awakened something that should have remained buried in the depths of the house's history. The figure vanished in an instant, and the night around me grew colder, as if the temperature had plummeted abruptly. I felt an overwhelming urge to escape, a primal survival instinct screaming danger. But when I looked back at the house, I realized my grandmother was no longer there, as though she had disappeared along with the light that once illuminated the place. The darkness seemed to close in around me, and the house had become an unrecognizable maze. The weight of loneliness and despair settled in my chest, and every shadow seemed to dance around me, as though trying to trap me within a secret I wasn't ready to confront. What was this place? What had I unleashed? The answers felt as distant as the moonlight, and I knew I had to find a way out before the darkness consumed me completely. Desperation overtook me as I ran toward the house, but the back door was locked, and the living room was empty. The silence was deafening, and the only sound I could hear was my own heartbeat pounding uncontrollably. I looked again at the box, now certain that something terrible had happened. Then I caught a reflection in the living room window. The pale figure was there, but it wasn't alone. Other shadows stood behind it, each more distorted than the last. I glanced toward the yard. The wind howled, and the trees swayed as if trying to warn me. The voice finally fell silent, but not before I heard one last whisper. "Go back." And so, with my heart in my throat, I ran toward the road, leaving behind the house and the secrets it guarded. knowing that some doors are best left unopened and that the countryside holds mysteries better kept forgotten. On that sunny summer afternoon, the heat of the day led me to decide to visit my grandfather's old property, a place that had remained closed for years, guarding secrets and memories of a distant past. He always used to say the house had a strange energy, but in my youthful innocence I never paid much attention to his warnings. Upon arrival, a feeling of nostalgia mixed with unease washed over me. Time had left its marks, with peeling walls and a strong smell of mold lingering in the air, creating an atmosphere of abandonment. As I explored the dusty rooms, the unsettling sensation of being watched grew stronger, an invisible presence that made me feel uneasy. That's when I decided to escape the oppressive environment and search for something to distract me. I recalled the stories my grandfather used to tell about a well he always advised me to avoid, stirring a mix of curiosity and apprehension within me. After a few minutes of walking across the property, I found the well hidden among the trees, almost forgotten by time. It was covered in moss, its uneven structure betraying years of neglect, and the water within appeared dark and murky, as if it concealed deep secrets. Both curious and cautious, I approached the edge for a closer look. The surface of the water reflected not only the sky but something more, distorted figures that danced below the surface, creating a hypnotic illusion. My heart began to race, a mixture of fear and fascination consuming me. On impulse, I threw a stone into the well, hoping to hear a sound that would ground me in reality. The impact echoed, slicing through the oppressive silence of the forest. But what came next was even more terrifying. The water began to stir violently, and the reflections intensified, revealing shapes that seemed to writhe in despair. A chill ran down my spine as a voice whispered my name, soft and seductive, yet laced with a tension that froze me in place. "Don't look at me," it seemed to echo along the walls of the well, a distant, haunting warning. My instincts screamed for me to step back, but my curiosity proved stronger. The distorted figures now appeared almost tangible, as if they wanted to pull me into the well, luring me with promises of knowledge and revelations. The idea of diving into that dark water grew tempting, yet a part of me understood I might be standing on the edge of an abyss I was never meant to explore. The weight of the decision became unbearable, and I realized my grandfather's old warning might hold truths far deeper than I was prepared to face. The water began to bubble, as if an invisible force was churning beneath its surface, and the atmosphere around me grew heavy, almost oppressive. A heightened sense of alertness took over me, as though the air itself was charged with electricity. The voice I had heard earlier now sounded clearer, almost like a desperate scream echoing from the depths of the well. Each word seemed to resonate in my mind, amplifying my panic and urging me to step back. Before I could take more than 2 steps, a disturbing noise emerged from within the well, a sound resembling something slowly dragging itself toward the surface. The impulse to flee swelled in my chest, yet curiosity held me in place, as though I were trapped in an invisible web, torn between the urge to escape and the need to understand what was happening. Then, in a terrifying instant, something massive and dark emerged from the edge of the well. It was a shadow, a faceless, human-like figure that loomed over me with an oppressive presence. Its disproportionately long arms stretched toward me, as if trying to grasp me, and the sight was so horrifying that a scream caught in my throat. Time seemed to slow, and each heartbeat echoed loudly in my ears, a cruel reminder that I was in danger. Fear paralyzed me, and in a moment of desperation I closed my eyes, wishing for it all to be a nightmare, that when I opened them again I would be back home, safe and far from this terror. When I finally dared to open my eyes again inexplicably, I found myself back in the yard, far from the well, as if nothing had happened. However, the sense that something had followed me lingered, like an unwelcome shadow clinging to my skin. The world around me seemed darker, the air heavier, as if the trees whispered secrets I was never meant to hear. I turned to look back at the well, a shiver running down my spine as I noticed that the darkness seemed denser, more menacing. Each step I took toward the house was accompanied by the feeling that the faceless figure was still watching, waiting for the right moment to reappear. The mystery of the well and the voice that called to me continued to echo in my mind, a haunting memory that made me question what had truly transpired that fateful afternoon. I knew I needed to uncover what was hidden, but the cost of such curiosity might be far greater than I was willing to pay. In the days that followed that fateful afternoon, a series of strange events began to unfold in my life. At home, I heard unsettling whispers that seemed to float through the air, as if voices from another world were trying to communicate. The lights flickered erratically, intensifying my sense that something was wrong, and even more terrifying, the dreams that visited me at night were filled with disturbing images. That shadow, which initially appeared as a mere curiosity, had become a constant and oppressive presence in my mind. Each morning I woke up more exhausted, a deep unease settling in my chest, as if a part of me were being slowly consumed by doubt and fear. It was clear that I needed to return to the well. Confronting what I had awakened was the only way to free myself from this torment. Upon arriving at the old property, I noticed that the place was even darker than before. The sunlight seemed to have hidden behind heavy clouds, creating a dense and suffocating atmosphere. As I approached the well, the water was murkier, a deep blackness that seemed to absorb all the light around it. The air was charged with electricity, and the feeling that I was not alone intensified. Without hesitation, I shouted at the figure I knew was there, daring it to reveal itself. I spoke about what I had seen, about my desire for it to leave me in peace. To my surprise, the shadow began to writhe, and the voice that had previously resonated as a distant echo now transformed into a mix of lament and anger, a cacophony of emotions reverberating off the walls of the well. It was then that I realized the terrible truth. The curse of the well wasn't just a story told to frighten children. I had awakened something that had been imprisoned there for a long time, something that now sought to devour me. From that fateful day onward, I never returned to that property. What I witnessed that afternoon still echoes in my mind, a constant reminder that some curiosities are dangerous and should remain buried. The shadow, now an inseparable part of my story, continues to haunt my dreams and whisper in moments of silence, a dark warning that some doors should never be opened. With each passing night, I reinforce the lesson I learned the hard way. There are mysteries in this world that are not meant to be unraveled, and the cost of curiosity can be too high, often leading to consequences that haunt us forever.